Welcome to the Tennis Tuesday tip. My name's Gavin Fowl, LTA accredited tennis coach. My tip today is based around tennis strings and the questions that I get asked most when I'm at the tennis club. Probably the most common question I get asked is, when should I change the strings of my racket? Now, if you're not a regular breaker of strings, then it's hard to know when you should get them changed. A very generic rule would be, depending on the amount of times you play per week. So for example, if you played once a week, then the rule is that you would change the strings once per year. If you played twice a week, then you would change the strings twice a year. That's a very generic rule. But depending on how serious you're taking your tennis, so for example, if you're heading very close to a serious match and you want to do well, then I'd recommend putting fresh strings in there, because strings lose life over a period of time. As soon as you take them out of the stringing machine, they start to lose tension. They go dead after a period of time and they lose their life, and the ping off your racket starts to diminish the longer the strings are in there. So another good way to sort of check is you can listen to the racket. Now, I play with this one regularly and it doesn't make a pinging sound quite as much. It's more of a dead sound. This one's been more freshly strung recently and it's got more of a ping sound. So you could check the sound to see what sort of condition your strings are in. But again, if you're coming into a big match, I would change them. I would take them out and change them. Probably the next thing that I get asked the most is what tension to have my strings done at. Now, every racket has a recommended string tension, so I would probably follow them guidelines first. But each individual string performs better at certain string tensions as well. Many string beds, this is the string bed, a lot of the professionals now, and it's been going on for years now, they use hybrid settings. So for example, these are your mains, and they'll put a certain type of string in the mains and they'll put a different type of string in the crosses. For example, in mine there's a poly going through the mains because I want to get some power, I want to get some spin, but I also am a coach and I'm on the court a lot, so I don't want it to kill my arm, so I've got some synthetic strings going through the crosses. That's just to give me some touch, some feel. So you can experiment with all different types of settings on your string and it has an outcome on the feel of the racket. It's a real waste if you've got a quality tennis racket and you don't have decent strings in the racket. It just doesn't make any sense. You're wasting the quality of the racket, so really you want to invest and play around with lots of different types of string types. There's so many top quality brands. Again, you may ask your coach what string perhaps would suit your style the best. A very popular one on the tour is the Luxalong All Power. That gives you, especially through the mains, that's going to give you big hit, it's going to give you big spin. Other ones, RPM Blast, you know, Nadal was using that for years. It allowed him to go up the tennis ball and rip with huge amounts of spin. So again, it's worth sort of expanding your knowledge on different types of string. Ask your coach, play around with different types of strings. I use different strings now that I'm a coach. When I was a player, if I was playing a serious tennis tournament, I might look at natural gut. Again, that's the most expensive type of string. So continually, all the time, it's worth investing in your knowledge of string, or ask your tennis coach relating to what's in your tennis racket. But my tips based around when you should get your racket redone. Personally, if I was coming up to a big competition, I'd get it redone. Probably my last tip, if you should have two of the same racket, you don't want to go into a match and one does break and not have a backup. You want the same racket as a backup, you want the same strings as a backup. Probably the other thing to consider regarding tension are the conditions. At the moment, it's very hot, so it means the ball will fly through the air very quickly. It's got more possibility to go long if you're not putting huge amounts of spin on it. That's why Nadal was so successful at the French in hot conditions. His ball was really spinning up in the heat. Whereas the opposite effect, if it's really cold and damp, the ball will travel slower. So therefore you might look to go lower in tension to try and get more power in your shots. So you're just constantly playing around with what suits you all the time. But like I said, if you have any questions on strings, ask me, ask one of the coaches, and we can recommend some new strings for your racket. Hope that tip is some use. See you next week.